Coming up on The World Today, more Afghan cities fall as the Taliban advance. UK officials say Plymouth mass shooter was a licensed gun holder. Plus, death toll in Turkey floods rises to 27. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin with the situation in Afghanistan as the United Nations, the country's neighbors, to keep their borders open as the number of civilians fleeing the Taliban onslaught swells. Thousands of those internally displaced have been arriving in Kabul, seeing the capital as their last safe refuge. The Taliban has seized the country's second largest city, Kandahar, the latest provincial capital to fall. It has control over 18 provincial capitals across the country.
Afghanistan's second biggest city, Kandahar, has fallen to the Taliban in a significant blow for government forces there. Kandahar is a traditional stronghold for the militant group and a key economic hub. A spokesman for the Taliban says they had captured 3 other cities, including the capital of Helmand province. They now control most of northern Afghanistan and about a third of the country's regional capitals. In response to the Taliban's swift advances, the Pentagon announced on Thursday that it will be sending 3,000 extra troops to help evacuate U.S. embassy staff.
This is not abandonment. This is not an evacuation. This is not the wholesale withdrawal. What this is a reduction in the size of our civilian footprint. This is a drawdown of civilian Americans who will, in many cases, be able to perform their important functions elsewhere, whether that's in the United States or elsewhere in the region.
Britain is also deploying troops to help bring its nationals home, as the UK Defence Minister warns the country is spiraling towards a failed state that could become a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda. A U.S. intelligence assessment this week said that the Taliban could isolate Kabul within 30 days and take it over in 90. The United Nations has warned that if the offensive does reach the capital, it will have a catastrophic impact on civilians.
We fear the West is yet to come, and a larger tide of hunger is fast approaching. It's no longer a secret the situation is worsened and is becoming increasingly unpredictable. The conflict has accelerated much faster than we all anticipated, and the situation has all the hallmarks of a humanitarian catastrophe.
The speed of the offensive has sparked recriminations among many Afghans over President Joe Biden's decision to withdraw from the conflict. Biden said this week that he did not regret his decision, noting that Washington has spent more than $1 trillion and lost thousands of troops.
VOA's Pakistan and Afghanistan Bureau Chief Aisha Tanzim joins us from Kabul for more on this. Hi Aisha, the situation on ground is getting more and more worrying, isn't it?
Yes, it's getting very, very tense. In Kabul, the mood's somber. Everybody is thinking about the speed of the Taliban advances, or as some are calling it, the speed of the government failure. Everybody that I know, all the Afghans that I know, they're thinking about, those who haven't left already are thinking about leaving. A lot of the spokespersons of the government have shut their phones and they're not responding to our requests for comments. We did hear from the Vice President on Twitter today, who said that there was a National Security Council meeting chaired by the President in which they decided to stand firm against the Taliban. However, as you said, a lot of the country has already fallen to the militants by this count, and it's actually changing by the hour, not by the day. So by this time, 18 provincial capitals, that's out of 34, half the country is now under Taliban control, and they're surrounding Kabul. They're literally between Kabul and the Taliban in the south. They're literally two provinces where there's already fighting has started. And by two provinces, I don't mean one and two, I mean parallel side by side. So literally the distance between Kabul and Taliban controlled area is squeezing. They're also controlling the north. So the situation here is getting very, very, very tense.
It's indeed worrying, and with the Taliban making such rapid gains like you have mentioned, are there fears that Kabul could fall as quick as analysts are predicting? And you also mentioned, you know, the meeting the vice president was talking about. What do we know has been said in that meeting?
Well, first of all, the speed of Taliban takeover, whether Kabul would fall at this point, everybody I'm talking to, they're shell-shocked and they have stopped analyzing. I mean, a week ago or before last Friday when Taliban started taking provincial capitals, people were thinking the fall of Kabul was a year away, 6 months away, you know, that it was not going to be that easy. It was going to be a tough fight. The cities will not fall so easily. But when cities started falling, like Kandahar, the second biggest city of Afghanistan, Herat, where the Taliban attack had been repulsed by Ismail Khan, the famous warlord, when they started falling and governors started surrendering to Taliban, we saw footage of Taliban escorting governors out of their areas and bringing them to the government-controlled areas. We saw Ismail Khan, as he was trying to leave Herat, captured by Taliban, and then an announcement. I don't know whether Ismail Khan agreed to it or not, but the Taliban announced that Ismail Khan has now joined them. So all of those has changed people's minds, and now people are thinking maybe the Taliban will be around Kabul, who knows, within the next week or the next couple of weeks. And there are two scenarios that are being discussed here. One scenario is that the Taliban will surround Kabul and strangle it from all sides, all supplies going in and out, and will force the Afghan government to surrender or resign or come to terms. And the other scenario is that they will attack. And honestly, at this point, with everybody's analysis being so wrong, nobody is betting on either one of them.
Now, this advancement... All right, go on.
You wanted to ask about the meeting. So yes, two things occurred in that meeting. One is, as I said, the announcement that President Ghani, there were rumors going on that President Ghani might resign in response for a Taliban ceasefire. After this meeting, an announcement by the vice president that they're, in his words, standing firm against the Taliban and they will fight. And the second is this development where Marshal Abdul Rashid Dostum, former warlord and Afghanistan's highest-ranking military official, has flown to Mazar-e-Sharif, where he is coordinating with another warlord, Atta Muhammad Noor, and they're going to try and fight against Taliban in Mazar-e-Sharif. Now, Mazar-e-Sharif is another city that was attacked but has not fallen yet in the north.
All right, then. Now, this advancement is forcing many of Afghans to flee the country, and we're hearing that Pakistani border and security officers even clashed with hundreds of Afghans that were stranded at the side of a major border crossing earlier today. What more can you tell us about that?
I mean, all we know is that wherever there's fighting, a lot of people are moving and they're going in all directions. Some are coming to Kabul, some are trying to flee to neighboring countries. So, for example, a couple of days ago when hundreds of Afghans gathered at the border of Iran, but they were sent back by Iranian border guards. Pakistan has already built a fence in anticipation of such a situation on the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And Pakistan said that it already has 3 million Afghan refugees in the country and cannot afford to host anymore. And if the international community wants to have Afghan refugees, they should make camps on the Afghan side of the border. So, and what we heard from the people who fled violence from other provinces and came to Kabul, for example, is they experienced horrors. They saw rockets dropping on their houses and their loved ones getting killed. We talked to one woman. She said, "My husband's killed, killed, my kids are killed. I'm here with my 2 young kids alone in Kabul. What do I do? Where do I go? And her story is not unique. There are lots of such stories. Tens of thousands of families have fled. Afghanistan is already suffering a huge humanitarian crisis. Half the population of the country, now it's maybe more than half the population of the country, is in dire humanitarian need. There is not enough aid to support all the people who need it.
All right, then. It's a really sad story there. Thank you, the VOA's Pakistani Afghanistan Bureau Chief, Aisha Tanzim. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Rapidly unfolding events in Afghanistan are sending shockwaves throughout the international community. Now, the onslaught comes as U.S. and other foreign troops withdraw after 20 years of military operations. According to the UN, more than 1,000 civilians were killed in Afghanistan in the past month alone. We have joining us now for more security analyst Chidi Wanu on the Afghan conflict. The speed of the Taliban advance is taking many by surprise, with regional capitals falling like dominoes. Now, international forces spent years training Afghan forces to prepare them to take on the militants. So how have they managed to gain ground so quickly?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I think the nature of the Taliban's advance has taken everyone by surprise. The withdrawal was predicated on the Afghan forces being able to hold on much longer. But what you see is a classic example of the nature of Afghan warfare, in that the winning side or the stronger side is able to convince, the losing side, many members of the losing side, to surrender or to change over sides. So a lot of what you see in terms of the Taliban advance is not just them taking positions, it's also the defenders either surrendering or switching sides or just refusing to fight. So there's a psychological element and a cultural element to this as well, but you're correct in that it's taken everyone by surprise, the speed of the advance.
Now, at this point, how possible is it for the government to reverse these gains, especially with Kabul at stake now?
It's possible for the Afghan government to reverse these advances and to defend Kabul. I think Kabul is the most defensible part of Afghanistan, not just in terms of topography, but in terms of the concentration of troops and forces and the facilities. It's also at the center of the international effort. You've got Turkish, American, British troops that will be there, and Canadian troops. So it's unlikely that Kabul will fall, but it's more likely that other provincial capitals will fall before they're able to get themselves together. The biggest problem is that there is a deficit of forces and there's not enough air support to go around. But if they're able to come up with a cohesive, a good comprehensive plan, they should be able to hold the advance and then start taking back these provincial centres.
All right, just finally, a lot of people, including the UK Defence Secretary, have pointed fingers at the US. Do you think the withdrawal of US forces was a bit rushed, perhaps?
So it could be argued that the withdrawal was rushed, but the key question is, if they didn't withdraw now, when would they have withdrawn? After 20 years, hundreds of thousands of troops, and the amount of casualties and firepower that's been deployed, it's unclear what extra would have been done that would have changed this outcome. So there is an argument that yes, it's been rushed, but there was, this outcome is what's happening is what's happening. And it's very painful for those of us who served in Afghanistan to see what's happening, but it's also clear that at some point this war has to end. There is an argument that can be made, an academic argument, that this was rushed, but at the end of the day, the outcome is what it was going to be.
Right then, thank you so much, security analyst Chidi Wanu. Still ahead on the program. We meet the 11-year-old boy walking across England to save the earth. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. In Britain, police have named Jake Davison, a 22-year-old man who went on a shooting spree that killed 5 people, including a very young girl, in the city of Plymouth. Davison started shooting at around 6 p.m. on Thursday, first killing a woman he knew in a house in Biddick Drive in Plymouth. He then shot at 2 other passers-by who were badly injured, then entered a park and shot dead another man before killing another another woman in Henderson Place. He then killed himself before officers got to him. Police say the incident, the worst mass shooting in Britain since 2010, is not terror-related.
Last night, police received multiple calls at 6:11 to an address in Biddick Drive. The number of calls were considerable and were assessed, and it was later revealed that shots were being fired. It is our understanding, and I can confirm, that a man known as Jake Davison, aged 22, had murdered a woman at an address in Biddick Drive using a firearm. I will not reveal that address as we are still contacting the members of the family of the lady who has died. So there is no motive as we know at present. Again, that will be subject to inquiry, but we are at the moment not considering terrorism or a relationship with any far-right group or any such other group. But clearly he is on social media, and that will be part of the investigation.
Meanwhile, Britain's Home Secretary Priti Patel says the firearms license of the man who went on a shooting rampage in Plymouth, killing 5 people, would be scrutinized.
First of all, I just want to give my condolences and sympathy to the family and the friends of everybody that's involved, and also praise to the emergency services and the police for the rapid response. We've heard from the Chief Constable that the police in particular were there within 6 minutes. Well, first of all, when it comes to firearm licensing, that is absolutely what the police oversee. And clearly, I will be asking questions, definitely in terms of local policing and raising this with the Chief Constable. But I think right now, the tragedy happened last night, and there are a lot of issues, implications, lives have been lost, people have been murdered. This is absolutely tragic and devastating. And for the entire community right now, this will be deeply shocking. So obviously that's where the focus is. There will be a range of questions that will inevitably be asked, and I'll be doing exactly the same through the conversations and the discussions that I'll be having with the Chief Constable. Well, the whole issue...
Well, let's get some updates from Zambia's presidential and parliamentary elections now. Vote counting is on the way after the hard-fought general election that saw social media restricted in the capital, and President Edgar Lungu sent more troops to 3 provinces to quell violence. The ballot is expected to be the tightest standoff yet between incumbent President Edgar Lungu and main opposition candidate Hakainde Hichilema, who is vying the top job for the 6th time and is backed by an alliance of 10 parties. Violence was reported in the northwestern province, a Hichilema stronghold, where 2 people, including a ruling Patriotic Front Party chairman, was killed. The president blames his rivals United Party for National Development Party. Zambia's Electoral Commission has launched an investigation into the chairman's murder, which the UNDP distanced itself from, calling it a distraction tactic. As the world continues to battle against COVID-19, over 204 million cases have been recorded, with the death toll exceeding 4.32 million. Over 4.4 billion vaccine doses have also been administered across the world. Let's take a look at the latest development in our COVID-19 global update.
Israel has lowered to 50 from 60 the minimum age of eligibility for a COVID-19 vaccine booster shot, and will also offer them to health workers hoping to stem a surge in Delta variant infections. After a successful vaccination campaign launched in late 2020, in which around 60% of the population have received 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine, new daily cases dropped from more than 10,000 in January to single digits in June. Over the spread of the Delta variant across the globe, new infections have jumped in Israel, reaching 5,946 on Monday, and serious illnesses have been increasing as well. According to China's National Health Commission, more than 777 million Chinese have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, accounting for 55% of the country's 1.4 billion people. The country is experiencing a resurgence of locally transmitted cases driven by the Delta variant, and health authorities have been working hard to contain the epidemic. Over in the Philippines, hundreds of motorcycle and delivery riders queued at a drive-in vaccination site in Manila today amid a growing number of coronavirus cases in the Philippine capital. Drive-in vaccinations for motorists were initiated to help protect the transportation sector amid a rise in coronavirus cases worsened by the Delta variant that has prompted a 2-week lockdown in the greater Manila area. New South Wales State has reported 390 new locally acquired COVID-19 cases, the highest number since the start of the pandemic. It comes despite a nearly 7-week lockdown in the state capital, Sydney, and eclipsed the previous daily high of 356 set on Tuesday. Daily cases have topped 300 for the past 4 days.
We had, unfortunately, 390 cases of community transmission. Some are still under investigation, but at least 60 of those have been infectious in the community. And I anticipate, given the large number of cases we've had in the last few days, that unfortunately this trend will continue for at least the next few days. So it means all of us have to work harder to make sure we stay at home and follow the rules.
Meanwhile, Australia's capital city, Canberra, has entered the first day of lockdown in more than a year after the territory recorded 2 new cases. Investigations are still underway to find the source of the outbreak in the territory, which has largely escaped any COVID-19 cases since the start of the pandemic. And finally, Russia has reported a record high 815 coronavirus-related deaths in the last 24 hours, while Moscow's mayor says hospitalizations from the disease in the capital have halved over the past 6 weeks. Russia's daily reported COVID-19 infections have gradually dipped from a peak in July that authorities blamed on the infectious Delta variant and a slow vaccination rate.
Turkey's Black Sea coastal provinces are battling severe flash flooding in Bartın, Kastamonu, Sinop and Samsun. On Friday, emergency workers battled to relieve the flood-hit areas as the death toll rises to 27 in the second natural disaster to strike the country this month. Search and rescue crews also recovered 10 bodies overnight. The floods is the worst Turkey has experienced, bringing chaos to northern provinces just as authorities declare the wildfires that have raged through southern coastal regions for 2 weeks under control. Well, central China's Hubei province is also battling floods. Unfortunately, at least 21 people have died and 4 missing in Suzhou city. Investigation shows that the heavy downpour has affected more than 8,000 residents, damaged more than 2,700 houses and shops, destroying 11.3 kilometers of road, 63 bridges and 725 power and communication cables. Rescue efforts is now underway in the county as fire and rescue crew dispatches 173 professional members and 13 boats to aid the regions. And as we end the program today, let's join Jude Walker, who is walking across England to save the planet. The 11-year-old boy is on an odyssey he hopes will help save Earth as he is walking to London from northern England in a bid to garner support for carbon tax to tackle carbon emissions. Partly inspired by activist Greta Thunberg, Walker from Hebburn Bridge in Yorkshire has braved hills, rain, heat and doubts along his 210-mile trek to the British Parliament in Westminster. He walks for 10 miles a day, accompanied on each day's walk with either members of his family or friends, and he's due to finish the walk at St. James Park on August 14.
I'm Jude, I'm 11. I'm walking 210 miles from Hebburn Bridge to London, and it's going to take 21 days, and I'm doing this because I want the UK government to introduce a carbon tax. Carbon tax would make emitters of CO2, so like people who, the companies that burn fossil fuels or things like that, they would have to pay for the amount of tons of CO2 that they emit or other greenhouse gases, and that would make it profitable for them to switch to a renewable option. One day I was just, Mummy was in bed and the idea itself suddenly struck me. I went upstairs and told Mummy my idea, and she said okay, and then fell back to sleep. And then the next day, she said, okay, why don't you just try a training walk? And I did a 10-mile training walk from Hebden Bridge to Elland along the canal, and then I thought that was really easy because it was just completely flat. And then she said, okay, why don't you try 4 really hilly walks in a row? And I did that, and I thought, oh, I can definitely do this. This is really easy. I mean,
I will wish him all the best. That's it on the program for today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adibuki.